agriculture take forward the supply side management measures. So as far as Hong Kong is concerned, I see that the government has been making an effort. We do not have sufficient farmland, so we advocate multi-story operations. Now, for livestock farming, this can remain. What about the third initiative? From a single source of supply to supply side management, there are still inadequacies in terms of wholesale food markets and its management. It has to do with the problem with aligning the standards in two places. The government should help up our agriculture and fisheries industries upgrade and transform. Now, on marine economy, in the northern metropolis, it is surrounded by estuaries on the eastern and western side. However, in Shenzhen, on the eastern side of Shenzhen, there are 6 to 7 piers related to high quality development of marine economy. There is no dovetailing strategy on our part, however. I don't think we are doing enough with our Mr. Stephen Ho. Well, just 10 more seconds, please stop. Mr. Ronald Chan. If I may, I'd like to first respond to Mr. Stephen Ho's question. Well, I think that what you said is, of course, important. Food supply, food security. The SAR government had this experience during the 5th wave of the epidemic. After I assumed office, I also had some thoughts in relation to the holistic approach to national security. For example, in terms of the quantity and the source of food supply internally, we conducted an analysis. I'd say that the most of our food is imported from the mainland. So when it comes to food security, we need to better integrate into our country's system. And I can tell you that we agree with the mainland authorities on a number of things. We are well taken care of in terms of the variety of food and the source of and the supply of food. And I also attach importance to the development of the agriculture and fisheries industry. That is why we've allocated $500 million respectively to the 2 development funds. The EEB is also discussing with the sector to formulate a blueprint for the development of the ANF industry. And what you've said can be incorporated in the blueprint, including how we can complement each other's strengths and how we can help, for example, local fishermen in practicing fishing in the mainland so that we can complement each other's strengths. Mr. Ronald Chan, in the report, presidency expresses clear support for Hong Kong and Macau to develop and to solve livelihood issues. Housing supply affects property prices and rental. Now, to solve these problems, Chief Executive Yuan said that both the Northern Metropolis and Kao Yi Chao artificial islands should be taken forward at the same time. However, there is a concern that over $1 trillion will have to be spent if these 2 projects are taken forward at the same time. And in fact, according to the Financial Secretary, most of the funding for Kao Yi Chao artificial islands will come from public-private partnership and the issuance of bonds. For the Northern Metropolis, income will come mostly from I&T development and the tax revenue therefrom in the long term. these financing options may not help solve the problem in the long run. We may need to securitize the infrastructure developments and other non-traditional financing channels in order to tackle the problems, such as land bond and infrastructure securities. So, Chief Executive, will you make sure that instead of relying solely on public offers, you will make use of these financing tools and capitalize on the private sector so as to take innovative approach in raising funds from the private sector? Chief Executive, I thank Mr. Chen for his comments. We have a number of mega projects, and I am also concerned about the burden on the public coffers. I thank member for his support for, say, the financing option, so that by raising funds in the private sector, we can combine the capable government with an efficient market. We'll definitely consider quite actively any option that can help raise funds in the private sector to alleviate the burden on public coffers. This includes the issuance of bonds, public-private partnership, as well as allowing the private developer to have a share of the development income to fund the development. And also, for example, for City One in Shatin, we had this successful example. The developer was allowed to develop the surrounding area. In our effort to attract enterprises to set a presence in Hong Kong, some top-notch enterprises ask whether it is possible to allow them to take forward development so as to speed up development as a whole. Now, securitization, as mentioned by Mr. Chen, is one possible option. Now, I'd like to seek Mr. Chen's views on two matters. Sure. Should we securitize the infrastructure development now or in the future? The infrastructure projects will span a number of years. So after securitizing and issuing bonds in the first round, what should our consideration be for the next round? For Kao Yi Chao artificial islands, it may be easier to project the cost. But what about the northern metropolis covering such a vast area? How do we gauge the market response? Should we consider the different highlights of development in the area in our funding options, such as the I&T development? Say we have the logistics center within the northern metropolis, and I also like to have members' views on the financing aspect.
I think it's the test of my financial knowledge, Chief Executive. First, securitization. Well, the condition is that there should be stable income. You package the income and turn it into securities for investors. So for the first round of securitization, when infrastructures don't have any income, it's very difficult to sell these securities. My suggestion is that for the first round of securitization, you need to pick those with the stable income, say, for example, tunnels or shares of MTRC, because every year they receive dividends. In the future, when projects generate stable income, say, for example, in 10, 15 years, the first batch of securities have matured. that has matured, and then these later projects now receive income, then you can issue securities for these. Say, for example, there will be railway projects in a northern metropolis, but currently there is no railway line and no income. But for the Western Rail, when income stabilizes, then I'm sure that you can make use of these projects to generate cash. I do agree that there are many different development items in the northern metropolis. Say there is a INT park. It will take a very long time for income to materialize. And that's why I suggest a land bond. In this way, we say for acquisition of ancestral homeland or new land in the new territories, it may not be effective, but in Brazil, South Korea, and Ireland, they issue land bond to acquire land. And the bondholders can buy government properties or to auction and to tender for land or other means. These are many different options. The government can use many different options to finance, and I'm sure that the majority of the funding will be in place. Professor Lau Chi-Pang. Thank you. Good morning, Chief Executive. We need to inject impetus into our future development. We need manpower. We are the only city with universities in top 100 list. We have the condition to become a regional hub for higher education. The Hong Kong University recruit professors and high positions from everywhere in the world. So we have recruited elites, and this in turn is great contribution to our R&D, to our research and development realm. We have churned out a lot of doctorate students from the mainland, but universities can only recruit no more than 20% of self-finance students. For other institutions, no more than 10%. So there is not enough capacity and not enough foreign students to turn Hong Kong into an international hub. I suggest that these limits should be relaxed, and the focus should be on GBA as well. There can be a direct allocation of 5,000 undergraduate positions for GBA so that we can enhance our position as a higher education institute in the GBA. Chief Executive, I thank the professor for his views. I would like to ask you something. We have been very careful in the handling of undergraduate places in Hong Kong. When it comes to developing Hong Kong into a regional hub for higher education, there is an implication on our finances, and this is something that we need to consider. The financial secretary is here. He will be all ears, and he will be particularly attentive regarding our finances and the factors to be taken into consideration. Are there any ways to allow us to take in more non-Hong Kong students while maintaining our financial soundness? How can we develop Hong Kong into an education hub? Do we need to consider developing certain industries? I think it's down to striking the right balance. Professor Lau. In Hong Kong, we have government-subsidized universities and self-financed institutions. The system has been running well, and a lot of people here, including myself, have studied overseas. We have to pay non-local fees. So you can adjust the fees chargeable to local students and non-local students. We need to draw reference from the education systems in the US, UK, and Australia and New Zealand. We need to promote our education system overseas. Well, perhaps local students will not be happy to hear what I say, but there are about 35% of dormitory places for non-local students. We can increase the number of dormitory places or allocate more places to non-local students to solve their accommodation problems. For master's degree students, we've seen a lot of them coming to Hong Kong, and we've learned a lot from them. They only stay here for about 1 year. And everything has gone well. This is not a financial burden, and this is indeed an opportunity to turn education into an industry. Mr. Chow Man Kwong, good morning, Chief Executive. I'd like to write on this issue to talk about improving Hong Kong's development impetus using higher education. We talk about using science and technology and training manpower to develop the country in the 20th Congress report. The purpose is to serve national development. We see that, because of populists, there are obstacles set for a higher education system. Say for bachelor's degree in universities, no more than 10% in subsidized, no more than 20% of places for non-local students in government subsidized universities and no more than 10% in self-financed institutions. Well, when I studied 20 years ago, it was $42,000 per year. It hasn't changed. But regarding non-local students, and they have to pay about $120,000 or $140,000 for an undergraduate places, so they don't use public money. We're talking about top students coming to Hong Kong. We have talk about an aging population, low fertility rate, exodus of talents, and manpower mismatch. We have 73,000 people sitting for the DSE a decade ago, now about 40,000. And our annual number of births is about 32,000. And I would like to emphasize that this has nothing to do with public finances. So I do think that this ceiling should be scrapped. Regarding research and development, please stop.
Mr. Bill Tang, Chief Executive, I'm familiar with the report to the 20th National Congress. I give talks in schools. You talked about taking a problem-oriented approach, and it is very important. Now we need to deal with this problem, that is whether our youth have a sense of belonging. Second, housing. And third, just now, Chief Executive asked Mr. Ronick Chan for his expert advice on financing infrastructure projects. We have 3 new development growth points, Kao Yi Artificial Islands, Northern Metropolis, and Tseung Kwan O Area 137. Can we allocate a certain portion of housing for young people from 20 to 35 to join a housing scheme? They should make a monthly contribution of $4,000. The median household income in Hong Kong now stands at $20,000. So that's 20%, $4,000. In Singapore, employees are required to pay up to 20% into a fund for the purchase of property later. And this can help our young people by giving them hope, making use of the 4 development areas. So Northern Metropolis, Artificial Islands, Tseung Kwan O Area 137. this also relates to the interests of our young people. So will the chief executive consider addressing the housing needs of young people so that they can stay and contribute to the development of Hong Kong, so that we abide by the principle of putting our people first? Chief Executive. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. Tang, for his suggestion. I will give it a thought. Any suggestion that can help cultivate a sense of belonging among the people will be considered. The member talked about this novel concept. We will definitely give it a thought. When it comes to housing policy, new development projects, we'll consider anything that can have an impact. After I delivered the policy address, we have in fact increased housing production. In the previous 5-year period, and if we make this comparison, in the current 5-year period, we have increased housing production, and I'm grateful to my colleagues for compressing the construction timetable. We need to continue to make the best effort to catch up. In terms of housing policy, we also need to consider the implications of any suggestions. Anyway, I'll give it a thought. Mr. Lai Tongkuo. Thank you. Chief Executive, in the report to the 20th National Congress, there is a detailed description of how technology and science can support the country's development at a strategic level. In Hong Kong, we have universities with very good R&D capabilities. However, we have very weak capability in terms of commercializing R&D outcome. President Xi reminds us that in the course of building modern China, we must take concrete measures. So I support new industrialization policies to enhance the I&T ecosystem. We should make more effort in commercializing R&D outcome. In our recent visit to the Greater Bay Area, I learned about the extensive use of robots by one of the companies. This not only enhanced productivity, but also enhanced safety in the process. Now, there is a question mark as to whether we can put these robots to extensive use in Hong Kong as well. But this company is visionary. A few years ago, a joint research institute was set up with a university in Hong Kong. And last year, an agreement on technology transfer of these robots was signed. Of course, I'm happy to see that the R&D outcome is commercialized and put to use in Hong Kong. And in any event, I do hope that the government can combine these two capabilities so as not to give waste to our R&D capability. Chief Executive, I thank Mr. Lai for mentioning the use of technology and the use of robots in enhancing industrial safety. I fully agree with members since we both went on the same visit. After I came back, we reviewed the use of technology within the government. In fact, many government departments have been leveraging on technology, such as the DSD, in monitoring the network, and as well as other departments, such as the CDD. So that's about harnessing technology within the government. The other highlight of our work is the Raise Plus One scheme. $10 billion have been set aside as announced in the policy address so as to promote the commercialization of R&D outcome. So we are working on the midstream of research and development. Once we enhance our capability, as we have already had in terms of R&D, we also have a good market in the mainland. All we need is to work on the midstream process. Now we have an assessment panel or a vetting committee. We do hope that we'll be able to present results to the public as quickly as possible. Anyway, I thank Mr. Lai, Dr. Kennedy Wong, Chief Executive. It is a delight for me to exchange ideas with you here. According to the report, we should expedite the development of a digital China. In the 2 sessions, there is support for the development of platform economy. As I said in this council before, we should promote the development of e-commerce. This motion was carried. According to the latest statistics, in April, the sale of physical commodities online increased by 10%, accounting for 24.8% of the total sale. There is huge potential when it comes to online sales channels. However, we are facing a crisis in terms of export of goods in Hong Kong. I have a number of suggestions. First, we should make use of cross-border e-commerce to enhance connectivity and tap markets in ASEAN, as well as other markets. At the high level, e-commerce promotion fund should be set up to provide tax incentives for SMEs to promote e-commerce development. Third, in our country, there is a minister of commerce. There is also the dedicated post at the provincial level. We should set up a dedicated post so as to enhance G2G communication to address issues relating to customs clearance, settlement, delivery, so on and so forth.
Chief Executive, thank you. I thank Mr. Kennedy Wong. Well, it is always my policy to have the Chief Secretary taking up coordination work. But we don't necessarily announce it every single time because the goal is to resolve a problem. Once it's done, that's it. And we have Deputy Chief Secretary. They play a very active coordination role in district governance. And for the other deputy, he's also in charge of coordination work of areas that cover different places, say the GBA. So if coordination is needed, the CS or the deputy CS will take up the duty. I believe that we need to work on 2 areas regarding e-commerce. First, infrastructure. We need to ensure alignment of the infrastructure of the 2 places. I'm not worried in this regard because, well, we have the connection of LegCo during the pandemic. It was done. If there is an alignment of standards regarding R&D, that would be great. So we have dedicated task forces working on this issue. At the beginning, they would talk about standards, say customs clearance. The Secretary for Security talk about design of the system at the outset. We don't want modification. We want it to be designed well. So that is in relation to alignment. Certification and verification, we have e-signature. And that is an issue of authentication. We talk about this in the integration of in the GBA. We also have I Am Smart, which is an identity authentication app in Hong Kong. As to how we can expand its function and use, we will work on it. Thank you. Chief Executive, 20 members are waiting to have an exchange with you. Will you stay for another 15 minutes so that we can allow a couple more members to speak? Next, Mr. Kingsley Wong. Mr. Kingsley Wong. Thank you, President. I'm glad to have the opportunity to have an exchange session with the Chief Executive today. The Chief Executive talked about Kao Yi Chow and Northern Metropolis. I asked about options of financing to alleviate the burden on the public coffers and to enable better combination of the capable government and an efficient market. According to our estimate, for the two projects, they will cost over $1 trillion. Will you implement the various measures mentioned in the budget, that is, bond issuance for infrastructure? And you also consider using bond as an investment option in MPF, because for MPF we have over $1 trillion. We receive over $80 billion in contribution a year. Well, when the government takes over the duty to make contributions for low-income earners, that means it's about over $100 billion in contribution. A lot of employees would like to see investment option under MPF on infrastructure projects. I'm sure that this will be quite attractive to new employees and existing employees. And this will also ensure steady flow of fund. At the same time, employees will be able to receive stable return from the MPF. This is a win-win situation. This resolves the funding problem of infrastructure. At the same time, employees will be able to receive steady return from a sound investment product. Chief Executive. Thank you, Mr. Wong. A number of members talked about using different financing options to alleviate our burden. I thank them for it. Of course, bond issuance is one option and is proved to be effective. But how do we go about it? There are many different factors. We need to consider these options and the factors at play at different stages. Whatever financing option it is, I believe that we need to give people the right to choose. We're talking about the use of public money. Investment is a personal choice. At the same time, I would like to see our citizens sharing the fruit of our development. I'm sure that you're all very confident about Hong Kong's future. According to various reports and rating agencies, we see plenty of confidence on our future. And of course, if we can allow members of the public to share the fruit of our development, that would be great. I respect individuals for their choices. So we will give a lot of weight to personal choices. I thank you for your suggestion, but in the end, we need to listen to experts. But you have shed light on what we can do. Mr. Jeffrey Lam, President and Chief Executive, first of all, I'd like to thank you for your work in the past 11 months on behalf of my sector. Our sector expressed their support because they think that you're willing to listen and are willing to put words into action. Well, we talk about many different issues, and in this segment, we talk about development. We think the government needs to do more. Regarding legislation, a lot of the laws have been outdated. They were enacted over 100 years ago, and still they are in force. I do understand that you're working on it bit by bit, but we don't have enough time. Will there be a dedicated team to look at these legislations and make amendments? And there is still a sense of bureaucracy within the government that needs to be addressed. If we want people to feel happy, we need to deliver on their priorities and feel their pulse. We talk about economic issues, financial issues, say bond issuance. I fully subscribe with the points raised by Mr. Ronick Wong. Sorry, it's Ronick Chan. We talk about bond issuance. These are only for institutional investors. How can we open these bonds for purchase by individual investors so that everyone will be happy? I hope that government policies should feel the pulse of the public, and we need to do more in this regard.
Chief Executive. Thank you, Mr. President. I thank Mr. Lam for his comment. The government has a lot on its plate. The government helps people by addressing issues. It is important to accord priority to what is most needed, because I am one for a result-oriented approach. I want to resolve issues as quickly as possible. That is why, in terms of legislation, we need to take the most effective approach. Now, in terms of land approval and development, we have tabled into the Council a bill so as to streamline and improve the procedures. Second point, the government always strive to make things. I welcome Mr. Lam's comment, but at the same time, I'm grateful to my colleagues. After I've assumed office, I have always been grateful for my colleagues' effort, so that as we share the same goal, we can achieve progress in the shortest period of time. And I welcome your suggestions about allowing individual investors to purchase the bonds for the purpose of building a better Hong Kong and allowing everyone to have a share of success. Of course, we need to consider allowing individuals to be able to purchase the bonds. I'll give it a thought. Mr. Andrew Lam. Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Chief Executive. We want to attract enterprises and thoughtful talents. In order to take forward high-quality development, we need to have land. So I'm strongly support taking forward both the Northern Metropolis and the Kao Yi Artificial Islands projects. Chief Executive, as you may be aware, there is a concern on the burden on the public coffers. My learned friends here have talked about financing the infrastructure projects. And in fact, we have had experience of public-private participation in the previous development projects, such as Tin Shui Wai and also City 1 in Sha Tin, would cover these examples. So it's just a matter of resolve on the part of the government. I think the major concern is cash flow. So I support the issuance of bonds. I don't wish to repeat what the other members have suggested, but allow me to provide my own views. And I am happy to learn that the chief executive would also like to allow everyone to have a share of economic success. Now, in terms of the Northern Metropolis, there will be a major land resumption exercise. My suggestion is to allow land title owners to participate in the development process by exchanging the land title with securities or bonds. The government can also consider whether to allow developers to take forward development on the land for free. If you pioneer this initiative, I'm sure that many will join you. Chief Executive. Thank you. I thank Mr. Andrew Lam for his comments. Mr. Lam advocates exchanging land for shares, for options. Well, we have done that before as well. But let me share with you, in the UAE, in the Middle East, their government can set aside a whole area for a developer to develop the place into a mini region. The developer will have the authority to, say, make laws on tax and on other matters. So it comes in a package. When I came back, I pondered whether we could take the same approach. But then there are vast differences in terms of our legislative procedures. All I can say that I do keep an open mind when it comes to novel ideas, such as the integration with Shenzhen, so as to facilitate the flow of people, goods, data, capital. Of course, we need to comply with the laws on both sides. And I welcome any innovative suggestions from members. We're all contributing to the future of Hong Kong. Chief Executive, you may now deliver concluding remarks for today's session. Mr. President, I thank members for their comments, for their questions, and the interaction. This is the first interactive exchange Q&A session that we have created a new chapter on building a patriotic force for the future development of Hong Kong. I thank members for their comments on the relevant areas. My team and myself will mull over their comments. As I said in the opening remarks, there are three elements when it comes to the principle of loving Hong Kong and the country. We need to work as one. We also need to consider things from a holistic and high-level perspective. We talked about long-term development issues We also talk about macro issues. It shows that if the legislature and the executive make a joint effort, we can create a capable force for the development of Hong Kong. I'd like to reiterate the 3 major points. First, we need to have regard to the macro picture, as well as all the issues therein. We need to consider the relationship between general and specific issues. We also need to consider the general phenomenon. In other words, we need to decide on the nature of the problem from the phenomenon concerned. We also need to enhance our capability in adopting a bottom line thinking. I hope that all patriots will bear in mind these important principles so as to build a safe, stable society where people are happy so that we can achieve success. The Chief Executive's interactive exchange question and answer session is now concluded. The Chief Executive will now leave the chamber. Will members please stand up?